Warning! This podcast contains unapologetic speech, politically incorrect humor, and enough unfiltered logic to make your HR department choke on its diversity training manual. Listener discretion is advised. Though, let's be real, if you've made it this far into the show's life, you've already torched your safe space, canceled your subscription to outrage culture, and brought your own coffee in a mug that says, "This meeting could have been an email."
You ever notice how every week in America, the news feels less like a collection of events and more like the next season of a TV show we didn't agree to binge? You close your eyes for 48 hours, and suddenly, 5 new plotlines are in play, each with its own cliffhanger. This week is no exception, and tonight, we're tackling them all, without the commercial breaks, unless you count the merch drops. First in Colorado, 27 Democrats voted against making indecent exposure to a minor a felony. Yep, you heard that right. We're talking about a bill that was supposed to protect kids, and somehow it sparked a vote that left parents scratching their heads and lawmakers tripping over their own talking points. Then we're crossing the country to California, where Governor Gavin Newsom has decided to answer Texas's aggressive redistricting move with a little cartographic warfare of his own. It's a bipartisan love story. If your idea of romance is drawing lines on a map with the precision of a serial killer's scrapbook. We're also unpacking the upcoming Trump-Putin summit in Anchorage, a meeting that's either a masterstroke of diplomacy or the season finale nobody wanted, depending on your point of view. Toss in a nationwide spike in electricity bills that's making air conditioning feel like a luxury item, and a federal workforce purge that's got DC insiders clutching their pensions, and you've got yourself a Friday show that's going to leave your group chat buzzing. Now let's bring in tonight's crew. The voices that can take a news story from just the facts to how the hell did we end up here in under 2 minutes. First up, Brian, our MAGA diehard. The man could grill a ribeye, debate the Constitution, and recite Trump's 2016 rally speech in reverse, all before the coals are ready. He's the only guy whose lawnmower has a bumper sticker, and I'm pretty sure his smoker has a voter registration card. Then we've got Rachel, our resident independent. Think Switzerland, but caffeinated, well-armed, and with a healthy disdain for political gaslighting. She's the one who'll nod along until she hears a lie. Then she'll hand you a footnote and a reality check you didn't ask for. Daniel is here too. Our conspiracy theorist with a corkboard full of yarn and a filing cabinet full of what they don't want you to know. He can connect a zoning law in Ohio to a trade deal in Beijing and somehow make you believe they're part of the same master plan. And yes, he brought charts. And finally, our guest for tonight's Friday special, Bill from Brentwood. Bill's that friend who'll roast you for your bad takes, buy you a beer, and then drop a one-liner that makes you rethink your entire position. He's got the wit of a late-night host, the skepticism of a guy who's seen too many bad contracts, and just enough cynicism to keep this panel from getting high on its own outrage. Tonight's episode is brought to you by the Caleb Rourke thriller series, The Covenant Protocol and The Prophet Directive. Sharp, gritty, and closer to tomorrow's headlines than you're comfortable admitting. Book 3? Oh, it's coming. December's going to get loud. Let's talk about the true fuel of this show, coffee. We've got 3 roasts, all roasted in the USA from globally sourced beans. High Lakes Light Roast, bright, citrusy, perfect for mornings when you need to be smarter than your boss before the second cup. Rock Creek Medium Roast, balanced, smooth, keeps you steady during marathon political debates or when you're arguing with strangers on Facebook. Bitter Root Dark French Roast, bold, unapologetic, and strong enough to look back at you and say, "Is that all you've got?" And you need something to drink it from. Our Data and Dissonance mugs are built to survive both the dishwasher and your Monday mood. On the go, stainless steel tumblers keep your brew hot longer than most political promises. And before we move on, mark your calendars. Saturday, August 30th, we launch Gen X After Hours. Think of it as this show's rowdy cousin. Late-night energy, zero filters, and the kind of conversations that don't make it into the daytime feed. You've been warned. Colorado's House Bill 23-1135 should have been the kind of bill lawmakers trip over themselves to support. turning indecent exposure to a child under 15 from a misdemeanor into a Class 6 felony. Protecting kids is about as bipartisan as it gets. And yet, the House passed it 37 to 27, with every single no vote coming from Democrats. Their reasons? They said the bill could be misused, ensnaring homeless people, those with mental health issues, or even trans folks and drag performers. Rachel, when a vote like this goes down, do you see it as principled caution or a case of politicians too scared of their own shadows?
It's a mix, but in politics, perception is reality. You can have the most thoughtful reasoning in the world, but if you look like you're defending the indefensible, you lose the room. Here, the intent to avoid unintended harm might have been genuine, but the execution was clumsy. They could have amended the bill, tightened the definitions, and added safeguards. Instead, they sent a message that gets twisted into, "We're soft on predators." Once that's out there, good luck explaining the fine print.
So if you were in their seat, how would you have handled that vote differently?
I'd have gone on record supporting the principle, protecting kids, while offering amendments to address the edge cases. Put the opposition in a position where voting no makes them look like they're the ones ignoring safety. That way, you control the narrative instead of being steamrolled by it.
Brian, is this legitimate civil liberties safeguarding or pure political malpractice?
This is malpractice in broad daylight. Civil liberties matter, but there's a difference between protecting freedom and enabling bad behavior. You don't throw the whole bill out because there's a 1% chance it could be misapplied. You fix the 1%. You don't burn the 99% to the ground. And from a campaign standpoint, they just handed their opponents a ready-made attack ad.
But you've also talked about government overreach before. Do you see any merit in the concerns they raised?
Sure, overreach is real, but you fight that in the language of the bill, not in the final vote. This was the legislative equivalent of refusing to fix your roof because you don't like ladders.
Daniel, what's the bigger game here?
This is a culture war play straight out of the consultant handbook. You take a universally despised crime, lace the debate with hot-button identity issues, and let both sides lose their minds. While the shouting match plays out, the real legislative machinery keeps moving unnoticed. You'd be shocked how many unrelated measures sail through during these headline fights.
Are you saying the outrage is intentional, like part of a distraction strategy?
Absolutely. It's misdirection. The outrage gets the public so emotionally invested in one headline that no one's looking at the full bill calendar. And that's when the sneaky stuff slips through, because everyone's too busy arguing over what counts as indecent to notice a tax hike or a regulatory rewrite passing under the radar.
Bill, you're our guest tonight. What's your take on this whole mess?
Honestly, it's political Darwinism at its dumbest. If you vote no on protecting kids, you better have an explanation tighter than a jar of pickles at a county fair. These folks didn't. They tried to teach a college seminar on nuance while their opponents were handing out flyers that said they side with predators. Like, that's not nuance, that's suicide. And
If you were advising one of those 27 Democrats, what's the first thing you'd tell them to do right now?
stop hiding behind talking points and go face your voters. Knock on doors, hold a town hall, and explain it like you would to a parent who's furious. If you can't win that conversation, you can't win re-election. And frankly, I'd tell them to hire a better communications team, because right now, their messaging is about as effective as a screen door on a submarine.
All right, let's head west. Way west. California Governor Gavin Newsom has decided to answer Texas's redistricting push with a move of his own. Texas Republicans are pushing a new congressional map that analysts say could net them as many as 5 extra seats in the U.S. House. Newsom's counter? He's calling for a special election to redraw California's maps, claiming it's about protecting democracy and ensuring fair representation. Translation: California's about to throw its own elbows in the national political scrum. Brian, is this just political hardball in response to Texas, or is there a legitimate defense of representation happening here?
Oh, it's hardball, no question. But that doesn't mean it's not also legitimate. The reality is, Texas is playing the game with the rules as they exist, and California's saying, cool, we can do that too. The problem is, both sides wrap it in noble-sounding language, defending democracy, fighting for fairness, when in reality, they're both trying to gain an edge. Voters aren't getting fairness. They're getting the best deal their state can cut for itself.
You've said before you want clearer national rules on redistricting. So is this exactly the kind of tit for tat that makes your case?
Exactly. Until we have a standard, whether it's compactness requirements, independent commissions, or transparency laws. This is just a knife fight in a dark alley. And right now, every state's showing up with their own blade.
Rachel, beyond the tit for tat, is there a policy solution that avoids this cycle? Or is it just human nature in politics to exploit every opening?
We could absolutely fix this, but it would require lawmakers to voluntarily give up an advantage, which is about as likely as Congress passing a no more free lunches bill for themselves. Independent commissions are the gold standard, but they have to be truly independent, not stocked with partisan loyalists in disguise. And there should be public criteria for maps, like keeping communities intact, that voters can check themselves.
But if the political incentive is always to tilt the map your way, how do you actually get anyone to adopt those reforms?
You don't, until public pressure makes it politically painful not to. That's why transparency matters. If voters can see the data and the emails that show how maps are drawn, they can at least shame the worst offenders. Politicians hate sunlight when it burns their own side.
Daniel, this sounds like a standard partisan spat. So, where's the bigger pattern you always find?
This is Map Warfare 2.0. What you're seeing isn't just state versus state. It's coordinated national strategy. There are think tanks and legal teams that draft model maps the same way they draft model legislation. They feed them to state leaders, who can then say, oh, this is just our own work, while the fingerprints are from somewhere far more connected. It's the legislative version of offshore laundering, except it's votes, not money, being washed.
So when Newsom says this is about democracy, what do you hear?
I hear, our side wants the numbers back. Nothing wrong with fighting for your team, just don't gaslight me about the rules of the game when you're writing them in pencil.
Bill, you're from a state that's been through redistricting battles before. What's your take on this California-Texas dance-off?
It's pro wrestling for policy nerds. The crowd sees the flashy moves, press conferences, sound bites about fairness, but backstage, it's all scripted. Everyone knows their role, and the outcome's decided by who can grab the mic at the right moment. The difference is in wrestling, the fans know it's theater. In politics, they still pretend it's pure principle.
So if you were a voter in California or Texas watching this, what's your move?
My move, don't buy the merch, demand receipts. Ask your reps how much these special sessions cost, what metrics they're using to define fairness, and whether they'd still support that definition if the other party used it. If they can't answer without stammering, you've already got your answer.
Tomorrow in Anchorage, Donald Trump will sit down with Vladimir Putin for what's being billed as a historic summit. The official White House line is that the talks are about negotiating a ceasefire in Ukraine and exploring areas of mutual security interest. Trump's already thrown some gasoline on the fire by warning there will be severe consequences if Putin doesn't agree to stop the fighting. Ukraine's President Zelensky, for his part, is saying flat out that they won't be strong-armed into a deal they don't support. The stage is set for either a breakthrough or a diplomatic mess that'll take months to clean up. Rachel, when you hear Trump and Putin meet for peace talks, what's your first instinct? Genuine opportunity or political theater?
Honestly, it's both. On the one hand, we should always be looking for off-ramps to conflict. Lives are at stake, and if a meeting can save them, you take it. But the risk is in the framing. If the U.S. starts looking like it's dictating terms to Ukraine, or worse, cutting a deal without them at the table, that undermines everything we've said about respecting their sovereignty. Peace talks without the main party's buy-in aren't diplomacy. They're the theater with a press pass.
So in your mind, what's the sign this summit is actually productive, not just for show?
If Ukraine is front and center in the outcome, if the ceasefire terms are transparent, and if both sides make real concessions that can be verified, then it's progress. If we walk away with vague promises and a joint photo op, it's just a campaign ad in foreign policy clothing.
Brian, you've been in favor of tougher leverage on Russia before. So does this summit look like a strong move to you, or is it risky brinkmanship?
It's strong if there's follow-through. You don't just sit across from Putin and smile for the cameras. You bring a list of demands, you back them with consequences, and you make it clear those consequences will be real. The warning Trump gave is fine, but words don't move Putin, actions do. The risk is, if we bluff and don't deliver, we look weak, and that invites more bad behavior.
If you were in that room with Trump, what's the first item you'd push across the table?
I'd make it clear that sanctions will escalate immediately if there's no good faith movement toward peace. And not just on Russia proper, on their allies, on the banks that launder their money, on the energy deals that keep the lights on in Moscow. Make the pressure multi-layered so they can't just sidestep it.
Daniel, you've been hinting for weeks that there's more to this summit than meets the eye. What's your theory?
Summits like this are almost never about just the stated goal. Sure, Ukraine will be the headline, but I'd bet good money there are side deals on the table. Things like Arctic shipping lanes, cybersecurity agreements that really mean surveillance understandings, maybe even quiet conversations about energy markets. The ceasefire is the marquee act. The real business happens in the side rooms.
So when you see leaders wrap side deals into a peace summit, what's your biggest concern?
That those side deals never get daylight. They get buried in classified annexes, they're shielded from public scrutiny, and by the time we feel their effects, it's too late to push back. The public thinks they watched the whole movie when really, they only saw the trailer.
Bill, you've got the sharpest BS detector at this table. What's your read on Trump and Putin breaking bread in Alaska?
First off, the optics are genius. Anchorage isn't Washington, D.C., and it's not Moscow. It's neutral enough to feel like common ground, but American enough to remind everyone whose turf this is. But let's be honest. If either side walks out smiling too much, somebody got played. The best you can hope for in a meeting like this is both leaders looking equally annoyed afterward. That's when you know the compromises were real.
If you were advising Trump on how to keep from being outmaneuvered, what would you tell him?
Keep the conversation narrow and the promises smaller than the headlines. Don't agree to anything you can't enforce. And for the love of God, have your translators and lawyers triple check every word of whatever you sign. Putin's team plays chess, and they're thinking 10 moves ahead while you're still looking for your pen.
Tonight's salute goes to the Fisher House Foundation, an organization that quietly delivers one of the most impactful services to military families in the country. Since 1990, they've built and maintained over 100 Fisher houses near military and VA hospitals across the U.S. and overseas. Their mission is simple. When a service member or veteran is in the hospital, their family can stay close, free of charge, in a comfortable, supportive environment just steps away from their loved one's bedside. These homes have provided more than 12.5 million days of lodging, saving families over $650 million in hotel and travel costs. But beyond the numbers, it's about dignity, presence, and the kind of support that doesn't need a press release. Imagine you're a parent, spouse, or child of someone serving this country, and you get the call that they're injured or ill. You drop everything, travel across states, and thanks to Fisher House, you're not left scrambling for where to sleep or how to afford it. It's a quiet kind of patriotism, meeting the needs of those who've served without fanfare, without politics. Just love, care, and respect for our nation's heroes and their families. If you've ever wondered where your support could make an immediate difference, look up fisherhouse.org. They don't just build houses, they build hope. Let's talk about the kind of sticker shock that makes you check your meter for signs of fraud. Electricity prices. The average US household is now paying about $144 a month for power, up from $122 just a couple of years ago, and in some regions, the hikes are even steeper. The cause is everything from global fuel costs to domestic policy shifts. And yes, those rolled back clean energy credits are part of the political fight. Democrats are hammering Republicans in swing districts over it, and the GOP is pointing fingers at regulatory overreach and green subsidies gone wrong. Rachel, voters care less about the technical reasons for price hikes and more about the fact their bill is higher. So, who do they blame first?
They blame whoever's in charge when the bill hits the mailbox. It's political physics. People connect pain to proximity. Right now, Republicans hold the House and have been leading the charge on rolling back certain energy incentives, so they're in the crosshairs. But this isn't a one-party problem. Energy policy is a long game, and short-term political wins, whether that's cutting subsidies or pushing aggressive green mandates, can come back to bite you when the next billing cycle hits.
So how should a politician frame themselves if they want to dodge the blame?
They need to show they're doing something tangible. Negotiating rate relief, investing in infrastructure that lowers costs long-term, or cracking down on utility price gouging. We're working on it isn't enough. You've got to show voters their next bill might actually drop.
Brian, you've always been critical of energy policy that leaves us dependent on unstable sources. So do you see these price hikes as a policy failure?
Absolutely. We've got the resources to be energy independent, but we keep tying one hand behind our back. Rollbacks of credits aren't the whole picture. The bigger issue is that we've overcomplicated the grid with bureaucracy and bad planning. If we produced more at home, diversified our sources, and cut the red tape, we wouldn't be as vulnerable to global market swings.
But what about the argument that more domestic production doesn't necessarily mean lower prices for consumers?
That's true in the short term, but in the long term, more stable supply means fewer price shocks. The real win is pairing production increases with competition and transparency, so utilities can't hide behind market conditions as an excuse to gouge customers.
Daniel, what's the conspiracy board say about this?
Follow the money. Energy markets are some of the most heavily lobbied sectors in the world, and price spikes are rarely just bad luck. There are companies and investors who make a fortune when prices go up, and they have every incentive to keep them volatile. You can't separate policy from profit when it comes to power.
So you're saying some of this might be manufactured?
Not all of it, but yes, markets can be nudged. A refinery accident here, a regulatory delay there, and suddenly supply is tight and prices climb. Meanwhile, someone's stock portfolio just had a very good quarter.
Bill, you've got a knack for cutting through the jargon. How do you explain this to someone who just wants to know why their bill's $20 higher?
Simple. Your bill's higher because the people who make money off your power bill wanted more money. Everything else is detail. Sure, policy and supply matter, but at the end of the day, utilities aren't charities. They'll take every inch regulators give them.
And politically, how do you think this plays in 2025?
Badly for whoever's in the hot seat. If you're in power and prices go up, voters don't want an essay, they want action. And if you can't deliver that, they'll find someone who promises they can.
Let's stop pretending that voters have the bandwidth to track every policy nuance. They don't, and that's not an insult. It's reality. People are working, raising kids, trying to keep the lights on, and now watching those light bills climb like they're competing in American Ninja Warrior. Into that exhaustion, lawmakers drop bills that are 300 pages long, stuffed with half a dozen unrelated measures, and then feign shock when the public either misunderstands them or ignores them completely. The Colorado felony vote is a perfect example. Protecting kids should have been slam-dunk legislation, but they wrapped it in so much what-if scenario lawyering that the message got lost, and the public saw hesitation where there should have been resolve. The same goes for the redistricting fights. Both sides sell their maps as fair while sharpening them like prison shanks to cut the opposition's influence. And the summit drama? All sides claim moral high ground while cutting side deals in the shadows. It's exhausting, and it's designed to be exhausting, because the fewer people who pay attention, the easier it is to get away with with bad policy. If you want to wake people up, stop lecturing them and start showing them the receipts. In plain language, in daylight, without the fog machine of partisan spin. That's the real red pill.
Tonight's board has 5 pins, all connected by the same strand of yarn labeled exceptionalism. Not American exceptionalism, the political kind, where emergencies become the new normal. In Colorado, it's an emergency to rush bad bill language into law, and an emergency for others to block it. In California and Texas, it's an emergency to redraw maps every time the math changes. The Trump-Putin summit? Being sold as an urgent step toward peace, but the side agreements will have effects for decades, long after anyone remembers the press conference. Energy prices spike because of market emergencies, which, funny enough, always seem to enrich the same handful of players. And the federal purge we'll hit in segment 5, you guessed it, framed as an emergency to restore accountability while replacing one entrenched class with another. The pattern is simple. Emergencies justify speed. Speed kills oversight, and once the power is taken, it's never handed back. If you want to stop that, stop letting every challenge be branded as a 5-alarm fire that requires suspending the rules. When people say, "Never let a crisis go to waste," what they mean is, we're going to change the rules while you're distracted by the smoke.
Here's the deal. America's problems aren't complicated. They're hard, sure, but they're not complicated. You keep kids safe. You keep elections fair. You keep foreign policy strong enough to scare bullies without selling out your friends. You keep the lights on without bankrupting the family paying the bill. And you run the government with enough integrity that you don't have to clean house every time the White House changes hands. But for too long, politicians have been chasing headlines instead of results. That's why you see performative nonsense like voting down a bill that should have been fixed, not killed. Or holding redistricting hostage for a round of national talking points. Or playing photo-op diplomacy with a guy like Putin, who doesn't respect smiles, he respects strength. Energy policy should be boring because it should just work. The grid should be reliable, the prices should be steady, and we should be producing so much at home that foreign markets barely make a dent. And as for the federal workforce, trim the fat, sure, but don't burn down the house because you don't like the paint. We need leaders who fight like hell for the basics, not leaders who treat America like it's a branding exercise. That's my MAGA fire, and it's time someone turned up the heat.
We've covered 5 stories tonight that touch every corner of power: state houses, international summits, your own kitchen table, and the heart of the federal government. Let's go around and give the audience something to carry with them into the weekend. Not just a headline, but a principle, a warning, or maybe even a challenge. Rachel, kick us off.
For me, the thread connecting all of this is how easily urgency can be weaponized. In Colorado, they used urgency to pass or block a bill without taking the time to fix it. In redistricting, urgency becomes a reason to redraw maps before voters even understand the last ones. At the summit level, urgency becomes leverage. You're told a deal must be made now, or the window closes forever. The truth? Most of these so-called emergencies are manufactured to create a shortcut around oversight. If we as voters keep accepting the framing without asking who benefits from this being rushed, then we're giving away our ability to shape the outcome. Urgency is the salesman's best friend. Slow it down, read the fine print, and never sign before you're ready.
And you've got the receipts to back that up, I'm sure. Brian, what's your closer?
Mine's about execution. You can win a news cycle with a clever talking point, but you only win trust by delivering results people can feel. That's true whether you're cleaning up a bureaucracy, negotiating with a foreign leader, or promising lower utility bills. The American people are tired of performance politics. They want actual performance. And that means leaders who know how to balance principle with practicality. Protect the kids without writing sloppy laws. Draw fair districts without turning every map into trench warfare. Sit down with Putin without handing him the win. We keep rewarding political theater because it entertains us, But theater doesn't keep the lights on, it doesn't protect our borders, and it doesn't rebuild trust. Results do.
Well said. Daniel, bring us home on your end.
My takeaway is to remember that the headline is never the whole story. It's the trailer for a movie you haven't seen yet. And a lot of times, the most important scenes are in the parts they don't show you. Whether it's a piece of legislation, a geopolitical negotiation, or an economic shift, there are always layers. The public layer is for you, the private layer is for the players, and the hidden layer is for the people funding it all. If you only react to what you see on the surface, you're reacting to the part they want you to see. Every time you hear a story, ask yourself, what am I not being told? Who's not in the room that should be? And who gains if I accept this version of events without digging deeper?
Bill, you've been our guest tonight. Last word before I wrap it.
Look, I'm the simple guy in the room, so I'll say it plain. Don't get hypnotized by the pitch. Every politician, every activist, every lobbyist has a sales job to do, and they'll wrap it in whatever packaging works best for the audience in front of them. If they're talking to conservatives, it's about freedom and tradition. To liberals, it's about justice and progress. To independents, it's about common sense and unity. The product underneath might be the same thing in a different box. Your job is to rip the wrapping off and see if the product actually does what it says on the label. If it doesn't, don't buy it, no matter how good the commercial was. And remember, they can't sell you something you're not willing to take home.
And that, folks, is why I love having Bill in the mix. Straight talk with a warranty. Here's where I land. This week's stories, different as they are, all share one thing. Every decision, every vote, every meeting behind closed doors is about control. Who has it, who wants it, and what they'll do to keep it. In Colorado, it's control of the narrative on crime and punishment. In California and Texas, it's control of the political map. In Alaska tomorrow, it'll be control of the terms of peace, or the perception of them. On your power bill, it's control of what you're willing to pay and who gets the profit. And in Washington, it's control of the very people running the machinery of government. That's why you can't afford to check out, even when the noise is deafening. Because if you're not paying attention, someone else is. And they're writing the rules in pen, not pencil. Pay attention, ask questions, and don't stop until you get answers that make sense. Remember to speak truth, stir thought.